Hey guys, tonight we're stepping into a pair of mud-caked boots, dragging a splintered wooden cart through the filth-crowded streets of a medieval town. The air stinks of damp stone, soot, and something worse, something metallic. A bell tolls in the distance. People clear a path. They don't meet your eye. That's how you know who you are tonight. You're the executioner. And believe me, this isn't the career fair dream you imagined. Your first day starts early. You're summoned by the constable at dawn, handed a sword far too heavy and dull to feel ceremonial. It's stained not just with rust, but something darker. You run a thumb across the edge, and it doesn't so much as threaten a paper cut. No one sharpened it. That's your job now. Or maybe it's the assistant's, if you can even find one. No one wants to work with you. You're not a soldier, not quite a butcher, but somehow expected to be both, and wear it with a smile that says, "I'm fine with this." So, before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. And post your location and local time in the comments where, and when are you tuning in from tonight? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum, and let's ease into tonight's journey together. Your job today is simple, at least on parchment. A convicted horse thief is waiting in a cell that smells like despair and urine. You must drag him out, bind him, and when the crowd has gathered, lop off his head cleanly and quickly. The clean part matters. A botched job? That's not just sloppy work, it's borderline blasphemy, depending on who's watching. And everyone is watching. All of them. The blacksmith who once shared ale with you, the baker whose kid you tried to teach letters, and the priest who now refuses you communion. They come for justice, but they stay for the spectacle. Historians still argue whether medieval executioners were trained professionals or desperate men roped in by force. In your case, there was no choice. Your father held this job before you, his father before him. It's a bloodline, not a resume. And when your father finally drank himself to death in the stable after a botched quartering, the town didn't hold a vote. They just looked at you. No handshake. No ceremony. Just the sword, and the silence that followed. You don't get to live in town anymore. Not really. Your hut leans against the outer wall near the gallows. A strange, lopsided place built of salvaged stone and half-patched thatch, as if the builders didn't want to waste good material. The locals call it the hangman's nest. You call it home, sometimes, when the wind doesn't scream through the cracks, and the rats don't steal your dinner. Your hands shake on your first job. Not because of nerves, though they certainly play their part, but because you know what happens if you miss. There's no refund, no second chance. The crowd will mutter, then roar. The priest will whisper about sin and purity. The guards will look at you like a rabid dog off its leash. And the condemned? They might get up, scream, curse your name with their last breath, if you haven't already crushed their windpipe with the first swing. You've heard stories of heads that talk for a few seconds after the blow. You don't want to test it. One quirky little detail you'll soon learn. The sword's weight isn't just about killing, it's about show. People believe a bigger blade means quicker justice. So they expect the massive, almost cartoonish blade, even if it's completely impractical. It's like using a cooking pot to crack an egg. But they paid taxes for this execution. They want drama. And no, you don't get armor. Not even a leather apron on most days. Just a hood, if you want it meant more for anonymity than safety. Ironically, it does neither. Everyone already knows who you are, and it obstructs your vision just enough to ruin your swing. You walk the condemned to the block. Sometimes they beg, sometimes they cry, sometimes they spit at you. Once, you had a nobleman who laughed. That rattled you more than the others. You wonder if he knew something you didn't. A deal made, a soul spared, or maybe he was just unhinged. It doesn't matter, no. His head rolled like the rest. And when it's over, the crowd disperses like fog in sunlight. No one thanks you. The guards take the body. You clean the blood from your blade with rags that will be buried or burned. Some say executioner's laundry can curse the wearer. You've never tested that either. Back at your hut, you sit on a broken stool, staring at the hearth that won't catch. You haven't eaten. You won't eat for a while. There's no appetite left. Just the echo of steel, the wet crack of spine, and the knowledge that tomorrow brings another name, another face, another crowd, another swing. And still, somehow, this is the easiest part of the job. The tools aren't just weapons, they're symbols, horrors, and half-truths wrapped in oak handles and cold iron. You learn this fast. Your first week is spent digging through the town's old punishment shedmore, like a decaying barn with a lock that rusted shut decades ago. Inside, you find instruments that feel more like inventions from someone's nightmare than official tools of justice. The sword, of course, is the mainstay. It's meant for nobility, or anyone important enough to deserve a clean death. For commoners, that's where things get more creative. You find the gallows beam warped from decades of use. Rope frays near the noose, but no one replaces it. If it snaps mid-drop, it's God's will, not bad maintenance. Then there's the axe, broader, heavier, and more suited to splitting firewood than heads. But it does the job, most of the time. Except when it doesn't. One botched execution turned into a 10-blow ordeal. The poor man flailed with every strike. His family screamed. The crowd vomited. And you? You chipped a tooth from clenching too hard. Over in the corner sits the cauldron, big enough for a man, and scorched black with old soot. It's used for boiling traitors. Yes, boiling. Sometimes in water, sometimes in oil. And once, according to a record you find scrawled on a parchment, in lead. That one's so extreme that historians still argue whether it actually happened, or was just a threat whispered in court chambers to keep tongues loyal. You spot branding irons next long, metal rods with curved tips shaped like letters, crosses, and symbols. They're for thieves and blasphemers. One sizzle against bare flesh and the mark is permanent. Medieval PR at its finest scar. Someone's face so everyone knows what they did for life. And guess who gets to swing the iron? That's right, good ol' you. Over time, you even develop your own preferences. Not out of sadism, but survival. A simple hanging with a weighted drop is a efficientless mess. Less screaming. The breaking wheel, on the other hand, is a logistical nightmare. First, you have to position the limbs. Then, swing the iron bar just right to shatter bones without severing them. Miss, and you'll be at it for hours. It's not just agony for the condemned, it's exhausting for you. One fringe detail you didn't expect. Many tools come with names. Not official ones, those are lost to time, but ones whispered by townsfolk and scribbled in the margins of old law books. Griever, for a particularly jagged blade. The widow, for a gallows that once snapped 2 necks at once when overloaded. Some say, naming them binds your fate to theirs. Others say it just makes it easier to sleep at night, pretending they're old friends instead of instruments of horror. Then there's the chair. Not just any chair, a thick, spiked device used for extracting confessions. You didn't think you'd be responsible for that, but apparently your duties extend to cooperative questioning when the town's inquisition is short-staffed. You're handed leather straps, a funnel for waterboarding, and told to loosen the tongue of a suspected heretic. You do as you're told. You always do. In the middle of all this, a bishop visits. He inspects your tools and says, "Mercy lies in the swiftness of execution." Then he blesses your blade, mutters something in Latin, and rides away on a horse worth more than your entire house. You wonder if he truly believes that mercy line, or if it's just a way to let himself sleep better after signing off on another burning. And let's not forget the pyre-stacked logs, a central pole, and enough kindling to make sure everything burns fast and hot. Burning alive is reserved for special cases, witches, heretics, or people the town just really wants to make an example of. You don't light the fire directly. That's technically the constable's job. But you prepare the scene. You tie the ropes. You make sure the condemned is bound in such a way that they can't leap or roll off. Clean, efficient, theatrical. You start noticing how your hands smell different, like oil, blood, old wood, and something else metallic, bitter. You scrub, but it never goes away entirely, and people notice. They sniff and step back. One child cries when you reach for bread at the market. The vendor says nothing, just shoves the loaf into a cloth and throws in a crust, like you're a beggar instead of a paid servant of justice. Some days, you imagine new tools, a better noose with padded grip, a blade that doesn't dull after one use, a folding wheel you can store neatly beside the brand box. You think, maybe I could improve this trade. But then the shame creeps in. What does it mean to innovate death? To become good at this? Still, someone has to do it. That's what they always say. And you've already crossed the line, there's no going back. No other town will take you. No other guild will accept you. And every tool you touch now feels like it's welded to your very bones. You lie awake at night sometimes, replaying each instrument's sound, the thunk of a falling blade, the creak of a winch, the sudden pop of a shoulder dislocated by the wheel, and you wonder, not for the first time, if the tools are changing you or if this was who you were all along, just waiting for the right job to reveal it. You don't think much about failure until it happens. The first time you botch an execution, you learn a few things fast. How quickly a crowd can turn, how heavy your sword becomes with panic in your bones, and how long 30 seconds can last when someone's still alive who absolutely shouldn't be. It was a beheading. Should have been simple. The condemned was a baker caught selling bread, laced with powdered bone animal, they claimed. Probably human. The town cried for justice. The mayor insisted on spectacle, and the scaffold was packed shoulder to shoulder. You checked the blade that morning. Dull, but workable. You'd done this enough times now to trust muscle memory. But then your arms locked. Mid-swing, something in your brain hesitated. Maybe it was the way the baker looked at you, like he recognized you from childhood, like he remembered a festival where you both ate goose and watched fire dancers. The sword came down crooked. Instead of a clean slice, it landed near the neck's edge, severing muscle, not spine. He screamed. That's what haunts you. Not just the volume, but the betrayal in it, like even he didn't expect this to go so wrong. The crowd gasped, then murmured, then jeered. Someone threw an apple. Another. A stone. You had to finish it 3 more strikes before his head finally came free, and by then your hands were trembling so violently you couldn't lift your sword without both arms. The executioner's assistants dragged the body away, whispering under their breath. That night, the constable delivered a message: shape up, or you'll be next. Historians still argue whether executioners were always chosen for their skill or just their availability. Some towns trained them meticulously. Others simply pointed at whoever lost the most dice games that year. In your case, you inherited the role, but clearly, muscle memory only gets you so far when your conscience kicks in mid-swing. You start practicing in secret, quiet, after-hours swings into straw dummies behind the barn. You carve pumpkins for precision. You rub pig bones with lamp oil to simulate slickness. But nothing prepares you for the weight of real guilt. That's what no one talks about. One quirky tradition crops up in the town near the northern marshes. There, after a botched beheading, the crowd would spit on the executioner's boots as punishment. Symbolic, of course, but also a warning. Do better, or else. Your town doesn't do that, but you sometimes wish they did. Spit you can wash off. Silence stays. Botching an execution doesn't just hurt your pride, it hurts your livelihood. Payment often depends on performance. A clean death? You get coin. A sloppy mess? Suddenly, the purse is lighter, and you find yourself eating turnip stew for a week. Worse, if a noble's execution goes wrong, you may not walk away at all. Nobles don't like dying messy. Their families like it even less. There's also the spiritual side. People believe that a bad death traps the soul, that a person whose head isn't cleanly severed will haunt the place of their death. And guess who the spirit blames first? You. You become the cursed one, the ghost walker. You've heard whispers at night cries near the scaffold. Could be rats, could be guilt. You never investigate. Once, a monk approached you after a poor swing and said, "God forgives effort, not failure." You're still trying to unpack that. Was it comfort? A rebuke? A theological shrug? The worst part? The condemned sometimes forgives you before anyone else does. One man, already bleeding from the collarbone, whispered, "It's all right. Just make it quick." You did. And you wept after. Not for him. For you. You develop tricks. You drink just enough wine to steady your hand, but not enough to blur your vision. You soak your blades in vinegar to remove the rust quicker. You check the wood of the block for splinters, anything that might tilt the body and throw your aim. You even rehearse with the condemned if they're lucid enough, show them how to kneel, where to place their hands. You hold their gaze longer than you should. But none of this guarantees success, because every neck is different. Every body shifts under pressure. Every crowd watches like hawks, waiting for you to flinch. There's a town record, buried deep in the magistrate's scrolls, that lists a man who survived 5 beheading attempts. They stopped after the 6th and called it divine intervention. You're not sure if it's true, but you think about him sometimes, what it would be like to kneel on the block and just not die. Would you laugh? Would you scream? Or just wait for swing 7? And here's the cruel irony. When you do perform flawlessly, no one says a word. No applause. No nod. Just silence. like it was expected, like gravity doing its job. Only when you fail do people remember your name. Only when you stumble does the crowd find its voice. So you keep sharpening, keep rehearsing, keep breathing slow and swinging sure, because the next job waits, the next neck beckons, and the next crowd, restless and blood-hungry, doesn't care about your nightmares. They just want a clean show. The strange thing about your life is how you're both invisible and unforgettable. You walk into a tavern, and the laughter drops like a guillotine blade. You step into the church, and the pew beside you stays empty, even if the rest are packed shoulder to shoulder. Yet everyone knows your name, knows your face, knows where you live, what you eat, how many times you've slipped on the scaffold stairs. You live on the edge, socially, physically, morally, outcast, yet necessary, hated, but required. It's the worst kind of fame. No cheers, just whispers. Your house, if you can call it that, is built just outside the town walls, where the grass stays trampled and the flies hum year-round. The wind smells faintly of blood and old wood. You'd think the town would want you nearby for convenience. But no, they need you distant enough not to stain the market stalls with your presence, but close enough to come running when a noble needs his throat sorted. You pass people in the street and they flinch, not out of fear, but superstition. Some believe your touch is a curse. Others say looking you in the eye will bring death to your family. One child once asked if you sleep in a coffin. You laughed, but his mother dragged him away before you could answer. Historians still argue whether executioners were truly shunned, or if that idea was exaggerated in later centuries. Maybe it varied by region. Some accounts suggest executioners had reserved tables at feasts and earned generous pay, but your life doesn't match those scrolls. Maybe someone in another city is living that version. But you? You're a walking warning sign. Friends? You don't have those. You have people who nod to you if no one's watching, who leave coins on your doorstep wrapped in cloth so their fingerprints don't linger. You tried visiting the tavern once. Just once. Saturday down for a drink. The barmaid poured it from a distance, never making eye contact. You raised your mug to toast a passing joke. The room fell silent. A man at the hearth stood, muttered something about filth in the house, and left. Others followed. You've learned not to try again. Romance is worse. There's a widow who once shared bread with you. For a moment, you thought maybe, just maybe, you could have that part of life. Then her brother found out and threatened to burn your house down. Said she'd be sleeping with corpses if she stayed. She never came back. You can't blame her. Fear moves faster than affection in this world. And yet, the town needs you, desperately. The mayor pays you with gold coins bearing the face of a king you once decapitated. The irony's not lost on you. They give you just enough to live, never enough to leave. Every time someone commits a crime, they ring your bell. Every time a heretic speaks too loudly, they knock on your door. You answer. You always answer. Not because you love it, but because it's what's left. A quirky tradition you've picked up, carving marks into your wall for every job. Not names, just small notches, like tally marks. One day you count the mover 300. 300 lives ended by your hand. 300 people you probably passed in the market once. You start carving slower after that. And then there's the loneliness that creeps in like fog. It's not the silence that gets to you. It's the conversations you rehearse and never have. The apologies you speak aloud to people already dead. The jokes you mutter to yourself because no one else will laugh. You start talking to your tools. Not out loud, you're not mad. Not yet. But you glance at the sword and think, you and I are all that's left. Some towns give their executioners a cloak or badge to show authority. Yours gives you nothing. Not even a key to the scaffold. You have to break the lock with a rock some mornings. The guards don't help. They watch you like you're going to swing at them next. You'd be lying if you said the thought never crossed your mind. The worst part is when someone thanks you. Once, a priest whose nephew you'd executed placed a candle at your door. Said it was for peace. You didn't know what to do. You left it burning until it guttered out, half hoping it might spark something elsey. Fire, a transformation, anything. But nothing changes. Your world stays small, your steps careful. You eat alone, sleep alone, walk alone. Your dreams are cluttered with half-remembered faces and voices that don't belong to you. And even when you're not on the scaffold, you're never off duty. The role clings to you. You could be walking through a field, admiring the clouds, and someone would still say, There goes the headsman, because in their eyes, that's all you'll ever be. It's not just pickpockets and barn thieves you deal with. No, your work is an equal opportunity horror show. One day, it's a chicken stealer who mouthed off to the reeve. The next, it's a noblewoman accused of poisoning her husband with nightshade tea. And then there are the heretics, the ones who speak too boldly, too passionately, about things the church prefers remain unspoken. You become the sword, the flame, the weight of order, whether you like it or not. Today's task is different. You've been summoned not to execute a peasant, but to prepare a traitor of standing. That's how they say, it like treason, comes with social rank. His name is etched in wax-sealed documents. You're instructed to ensure a dignified end, which, translated from court, speak, means don't embarrass the nobility. But here's the problem, they want a head on the block and a message in the square. So you must balance precision and theatre. Again, historians still argue whether noble executions were truly more merciful or just more private. You've seen both. Some nobles get silk ropes, swords polished to a mirror shine, even veils to spare them the horror. Others are paraded through town like common beggars, their titles stripped, their faces spat on. The church says death equalizes us all. Experience says otherwise. This noble's crime? Speaking against the crown's new tax on landless freemen. A bad idea, apparently, when your cousins are dukes and your words can stir rebellions. You read the charges in your small candlelit chamber and wonder if they're even true. But you've learned not to wonder too much. Wondering leads to empathy. Empathy makes your hands shake. The execution is scheduled for midday, just before the market bell. Prime time. More than 500 people gather near the scaffold, jostling for a view. You recognize some of them people who refused you bread, now shoving forward for a better look at your handiwork. You step up, sword in hand, and the noble walks forward without resistance. He kneels with dignity, looks you in the eye, and says, "Make it fast." You nod. You always do. One clean swing. No screams, just a sharp thud, the hiss of 1,000 held breaths, and then cheering, like it's a harvest festival, like they just won a jousting match. You lift the head by the hair, hold it aloft. You hate this part, but the crowd expects it. There's something primal in their eyes, half hunger, half satisfaction, a reminder that justice has been done, at least according to the law. You wonder, briefly, if anyone in the crowd supported the man's opinions. Would they cheer if they knew they were next? Sometimes you handle witches. That's the worst. Because witches don't go quietly. They scream, they spit, they curse the town, the sky, you, and they often die by fire, not blade. You must tie them to the stake yourself, sometimes while they chant things that make your hair stand up. You've been told to plug your ears with wax if the speech starts getting unnatural. You try not to listen, but the words still slip in. One quirky superstition you've picked up from your predecessor: before lighting a witch's pyre, spit once on the ground and whisper, "Return not in smoke." He claimed it worked. You've never tested it, but you keep doing it anyway, just in case. And when it's done, when the body is burned, the head displayed, or the limbs scattered according to the town's macabre preferences, you return home to silence. You try to eat, try to sleep, but their faces come back to you, in dreams, in puddles, reflected in your blade. One man's eyes stayed open for 3 whole minutes after decapitation. You checked. Could have sworn they followed your movement. You don't tell anyone about that. Not every criminal is guilty, either. That's the part that shreds your insides most. A young woman once swore she didn't kill her infant, claimed it was sickness. But the town demanded blood. You gave it. And then, later that week, a midwife came forward with proof the baby had been ill for months. Too late by days. You asked the mayor if that changed anything. He said, "Number the people needed closure." You nodded. You always do. Sometimes, your victims ask you to deliver final messages. Tell my daughter I forgive her. Tell my brother I never lied. You never do. Not because you're heartless, but because you know no one wants to hear from you. The message would arrive tainted, carried on the breath of a man who wears death like a uniform. There's a grim practicality to your schedule. Mondays are for beheadings. Tuesdays, hangings. Wednesdays, floggings and brandings. The rest of the week? Flexible. You joke to yourself about making a calendar. Flame Fridays. Could be a hit. No one would laugh. Still, you prepare each act with care. You sharpen your blades, soak your ropes, inspect every knot and hinge. If they're going to die, they deserve it done right. That's the only mercy you can offer now. Clean deaths, dignified ones, as dignified as state violence ever is. The funny thing? Even after all this, there are townspeople who believe you enjoy it, that you smile under the hood, that you volunteer for extra shifts, that you're proud of what you do. And maybe, once, long ago, there was a flicker of pride, that you were useful, necessary, part of something bigger than yourself. But the shine's long gone now. All that's left is routine, resentment, and the echo of steel in your dreams. You don't just execute people, you perform their deaths. And the scaffold? That's your stage. Every step, every motion, every drop of blood is part of a brutal theatre, where the script never changes, but the audience always does. Some arrive wide-eyed and curious, others drunken and jeering. A few pretend to pray. Most come for the spectacle, and they always get one. By the time you're ready to ascend the wooden steps, the square has already transformed. Vendors selling hot nuts and sticky buns, children lifted onto shoulders, couples whispering, not out of fear but excitement. It's morbid. Yes, but it's also the closest thing to a town-wide event. Who needs a minstrel show when you've got a real executioner? You step out, cloaked and hooded, and the crowd reacts the same way they always do, a moment of hush, followed by murmurs. They crane their necks, wondering, is it the same one as last time? Will it be quick? Will the head roll? The condemned is brought out. Some shuffle, others resist. Some cry, and a rare few walk like saints, peaceful and resigned. And then there are those who fight with every inch of their will. The guards drag them, sometimes beating them half dead before they even reach the block. You hate those days most. The crowd loves them. You've noticed it. The louder the prisoner screams, the louder the cheers. The more chaotic the struggle, the more people lean forward, grinning like they're watching a bear baiting. One man slipped out of his bindings once and made it 10 feet before the guards tackled him. The townsfolk clapped. Someone tossed a coin. That was a good day, by their standards. Historians still argue whether medieval executions were meant more for punishment or deterrence. The truth is it was always both. Public killings were lessons. Morality plays where the message was, obey, or this is your future. And you? You're the teacher, the grim storyteller, the last face they'll ever see. And the props aren't just your tools. They're the gallows, the block, the wheel, the platform itself. Even the way you raise your arm or pause before the drop, it's all part of the choreography. You learn to milk a moment. Let silence stretch thin and tight, until the audience leans in, breath held. There's a fringe account from a small town near Brittany that trained their executioners like actors. Rehearsals, stage directions, even scripts for the condemned to follow if they were willing. You used to scoff at that. Now, you're not so sure it's ridiculous. Every performance you give here is just as scripted, except the screaming's real. You remember your first hanging. The condemned was a boy 16, maybe accused of horse theft. The crowd was eager. The sun was high. You miscalculated the rope's drop. Instead of a clean neck snap, he dangled, kicking and choking for what felt like hours. The priest kept chanting. The guards kept watching. You had to look away. You corrected the length for the next one, added knots for weight, started measuring neck thickness by eye. You became good at it, efficient. That's what they wanted. A crowd can forgive cruelty, but not delay. Sometimes they get creative. The mayor once asked for a double execution, husband and wife, accused of murder and conspiracy. They wanted it synchronized. You had to time it perfectly so their heads hit the ground within a breath of each other. You practiced for days. When it finally happened, the crowd exploded into applause. Applause! You couldn't stomach supper that night. And yet, even you find yourself swept up in it sometimes. There's a strange rhythm to the day. Morning prep, midday show, evening silence. You climb the scaffold as if it's a chapel altar. You deliver your lines, strike your blow, and step back into anonymity. A strange dance, repeated until you forget who you were before it began. You've heard children imitate your voice mock executions with dolls or sticks. They call each other the Hood or the Block Boss. They argue over who gets to swing the invisible sword. You think about warning their parents. Then you remember their parents were at the square too. laughing and nodding as the heads fell. A quirky superstition floats among the crowd. If a drop of blood lands near your shoe, it means someone you love will die. People stand back now, far back, even if it's raining, even if it's cold. They believe the blood can travel, can choose. You never correct them. Let fear keep them distant. Not everyone comes to see you. Some turn their backs, choosing to protest silently. Others drop to their knees, praying for your soul as much as the condemns. A monk once told you, every death you deliver returns to you threefold. You smiled, said nothing. But that night, your dreams were a mess of tangled limbs and choking ropes. Sometimes, the crowd sings, not for you, for the condemned. Old ballads, rhymes, dirges, passed down from older deaths. It's oddly beautiful, those moments. A strange, sad solidarity. Even you feel the pull, like something ancient and aching is being stirred. And when it's over, when the last head has rolled, the crowd has thinned, the guards are sweeping the square, you stand alone on the stage. Blood stains the wood beneath your boots. The wind whips your cloak. And for a moment, you wonder what it would feel like to kneel where they did, to surrender the sword, to vanish into silence. But then you step down, clean your tools, and walk home, one more show behind you. Tomorrow, the curtain rises again. You never meant to lose your soul. You didn't wake up one day and say, yes, I'll make a career out of death. But somewhere between your first clean cut and your 100th silent supper, something in you slipped. Not all at once, just piece by piece. Like coins dropped into a deep, dark well. The church never really knew what to do with people like you. On paper, you serve justice. In practice, you handle the devil's work. They say God forgives, but they never say if he forgives you. Priests avoid your gaze during Mass. One deacon refused to bless your bread at the Easter feast, just looked at you and said, he sees. You weren't sure if he meant God or someone else. You tried confession once, stepped into the booth with knees shaking, voice hoarse, told the priest everything. The noblewoman, the young thief, the heretic who cried out to the Virgin as you lit the pyre. And when you finished, the priest paused, then said, what you do cannot be undone. He didn't give you penance. He just told you to pray harder, as if praying was some kind of soap. Since then, you've mostly stopped going. Historians still argue whether medieval executioners were excommunicated, officially or unofficially. Some were denied burial on consecrated ground. Others bribed their way into forgiveness. A few were even considered holy in bizarre fringe cases, seen as vessels of divine wrath. But for you, it's simpler. Nobody says you're damned. They just act like it. You've taken to washing your hands obsessively, after every job, after every meal, even when there's no blood. It's not about cleanliness. It's about ritual. About trying to erase something you know can't be scrubbed away. There's a fringe practice you learned from a German traveller burning juniper branches after each execution. He claimed the smoke reset the soul. You tried it. It smells nice. Doesn't change anything. You started dreaming about them, the condemned. Not as they were in life, or even in death, but as shadows. Silent, featureless, standing at the foot of your bed. You've woken up screaming more times than you care to count. Your neighbours, if they can be called that, pretend not to hear. You wouldn't go knocking either. Once, on a moonless night, you found a note wedged in your door. You are the rot that kills the root. You burned it, without reading it twice. But the words echo still, circling in your mind like birds over a battlefield. The villagers have invented myths about you. Some say you were born with a caul and cursed from birth. Others say you never sleep, that you keep the heads of your victims lined up in your cellar. Someone once claimed you drank blood before every execution, to calm the iron in your veins. You don't bother denying it anymore. Let them believe what they want. The truth is simpler, more boring. You eat porridge, you nap, you sharpen blades by candlelight. But even if you don't believe in curses, it's hard not to feel broken, like something's cracked inside you, and the pieces rattle now when you walk. The worst part is when you stop feeling. When you execute someone and go home to stew without a single flicker of guilt or rage. Just routine. You worry that's the real sin-not killing, but becoming numb to it. You keep their last words in your memory like tally marks. Some beg, some scream, a few go silent. But it's the ones who forgive you that stay. A mother once said, "It's not your fault. This world was never kind. You nearly dropped the sword, Another, a merchant caught speaking against the bishop, muttered, "Don't carry me with you." You do. You carry them all. A quirky fringe belief from northern Italy says executioners carry soul dust, invisible particles left behind from the spirits they release. Supposedly, over time, the weight builds until they collapse under the burden. It's silly, superstitious, and yet you can't help but feel heavier every morning. You've considered quitting, truly, packing up, disappearing into the woods. But where would you go? Your name is stained. Your face is known. Even if you shaved your beard and took a different name, your hands would give you away scarred, calloused, used to the weight of a blade. You don't have the hands of a farmer. You have the hands of a reaper. One winter, you tried to leave, got as far as the river's edge. Then you saw a group of travelers trudging through the snow and stopped dead. The smallest one, a girl maybe 10, pointed at you and said, "That's the death, man." You turned back that night, didn't speak for 3 days. You write sometimes, not letters, not confessions, just words, scattered phrases on parchment scraps you never show anyone. One says, "Who delivers the deliverer?" Another, "My shadow is longer than my reach." You hide them in cracks in the wall, not because you think they matter, but because it feels like some part of you is trying to leak out. And when you lie down at night, alone, cold, with the moonlight slicing across your floor like a blade, you wonder if your soul is still in there curled up somewhere, waiting to be forgiven, or if it left long ago, and all that's left is the blade and the hand that swings it. When the blade falls, your job doesn't end. In fact, some of the strangest, grimmiest, most secret work happens after the death. No one talks about it, but you know the truth. Once the body's limp and the crowd has gone home, you're still working, cleaning up, sorting parts, sometimes even negotiating. See, the dead have value, not just to the townspeople eager to forget them, but to others people in cloaks who speak softly and never give you their real names. Physicians, scholars, alchemists. They come at night, knock once, twice, then slide a coin purse through your shutters. The richer ones send letters in wax. The braver ones come in person. All of them want something from the dead. It started small, a bone here, a tooth there. For study, they said. Then came requests for entire heads preserved if possible, sealed in brine or stuffed with herbs. You learned to keep barrels cold in your cellar, using snow packed in sawdust. You don't ask questions, you just deliver. Historians still argue whether executioners actively sold bodies or simply disposed of them in ways that coincidentally enriched them. But you've seen the ledgers. In some months, you earned more from the dead than from the living. It's grotesque, but coin is coin, and the towns never paid enough for what they ask of you. One night, a man from the university came, draped in fur, reeking of lavender and rot. "I'll give you 5 silver for a full skeleton," he whispered, as if ordering dinner. Articulated, "if you can manage it." You didn't reply, just nodded. You always do. You started learning anatomy not out of curiosity, but out of necessity. You studied joints, muscle decay, how long it took skin to fall away when left in lie. There's a pit behind your house now, covered in straw and stone. You don't go near it unless you must. One quirky tale you heard from a travelling barber surgeon. Skull powder, ground from the heads of executed criminals, cures epilepsy. You didn't believe it. Still don't. But someone paid you 4 gold coins for a jar of white dust scraped from a jawbone. Whether it worked or not, you never found out. Sometimes, families come asking, quietly, desperately, "Please, just the ring," they beg. Or, "Return his hand, so we may bury it." You oblige, if you can. Not out of kindness exactly, but out of some strange code you haven't yet named. One mother cried when you gave her a scrap of cloth soaked in her son's blood. "This is all I need," she whispered. You turned away before she could see your eyes. But not all families want closure. Some demand no remains be returned. They want the name scrubbed, the face forgotten, the corpse destroyed. You've burned bodies in the middle of the night, buried them under rocks, let the river take them. You've done all the things your church would condemn and your mayor would pretend not to know about. You once sold a pair of hands to a glove maker. No joke. He said he needed them to shape the leather more realistically. You never used that stall again. There's a creeping irony in it all. The living shun you, but the dead, They keep you fed. They don't complain, don't judge, don't whisper when you pass. If you're honest, you feel closer to them now than anyone else. You've even started talking to them, just brief mutterings while you work. Sorry, this won't take long. Or, I'll be gentle. No one hears. No one would believe you if they did. You've begun naming them again. Not their real names, those get stripped at sentencing, but nicknames. Redbeard, Left Tooth, Quiet Man. It helps. A little. You remember one winter when bodies piled faster than you could manage. Executions were daily. Heresy trials. Food riots. Thefts. You ran out of brine. Ran out of room. The pit behind your hut overflowed. You couldn't sleep not from guilt, but from logistics. Where to put the next one? How long before someone noticed the stench? The town never said a word. Maybe they didn't want to know. Maybe they liked pretending the bodies simply vanished. That the axe was magic, and you were some cursed illusionist. A fringe belief among grave robbers says that executioners carry a special mark on their souls, invisible to the living but visible to the dead. That when you pass a graveyard, the spirits whisper your name. You thought it was nonsense, until one night you passed the chapel's crypt, and every hair on your neck rose like wind through dry grass. You didn't stop walking, didn't look back. Once, you were offered a position in another town, more pay, less oversight. They wanted someone efficient and discreet. You refused, not because you love this place, but because you know what you are now, and you know this patch of soil is the only one cursed enough to hold you. Besides, you couldn't leave your pit behind, or your tools, or the letters buried beneath your floorboards, written to no one, sealed with wax and never sent. Maybe someday someone will find them and think you were more scholar than killer. That would be a comforting lie. At night, the cellar creaks, the barrels groan, the house shifts on its uneven foundation, and you sit by the fire, holding a cup of watered wine, wondering when the balance tips, when your work becomes something else. Not justice, not service, just scavenging. But until that day comes, you keep your saw sharp, your knife clean, and your secrets buried deeper than the bones you sell. You always knew the crowd could turn on you, but you didn't expect it to happen so suddenly or so violently. One moment, they're cheering. The next, they're throwing stones. And you? You're still holding the sword, dripping and useless, like a magician caught botching the final act. It started with a priest, a fiery one, the kind who loves the sound of his own voice and thinks sermons work better, shouted than spoken. He began preaching that death should be holy, not a show, that executions were sacred duties, not town-wide entertainments, that maybe, just maybe, you were enjoying your job a bit too much. You didn't think much of it. You've been called worse. But then a child went missing, and people started whispering, saying the scaffold drinks blood, saying the executioner works even when no one's looking. You became less a man, and more a shadow looming, dangerous, always near. Fear is a funny thing. It doesn't need evidence, just suggestion. One morning, someone scrawled a message in ash across your door. Death eats the hand that feeds it. Later that week, someone set fire to your woodpile. Then your tools went missing. Then the mayor stopped answering your summons. Historians still argue whether towns truly turned on their executioners or if these were isolated incidents. But you've seen it now. The way a crowd's gaze hardens. The way voices drop when you approach. You've felt the shift. You're not just feared. You're despised. And all it took was one mistake. A man innocent, they claimed. His trial rushed, his sentence doubted. You executed him because the scroll said to. Because the town seal was stamped in wax. But when the blacksmith's wife collapsed in grief, screaming that he was framed, everything changed. They didn't shout at the mayor, didn't protest the guards. They pointed at you. You tried to stay out of sight, hoping it would pass. But it didn't. It festered, grew legs. Rumors spread that you took pleasure in suffering, that you kept trophies, that you whispered to the heads. They said you were cursed, possessed, maybe even not human. One night, you heard footsteps outside, more than one. You bolted the door and waited, knife in hand. They didn't try to enter, just stood there, silent, staring. You watched their shadows under the door crack until dawn broke, and they vanished like mist. Nothing was said, nothing was done, but you knew the town had changed. A quirky superstition says that if you wear the blood of an innocent, it stains not just your hands but your breath, that animals will flee you, That fire won't warm you. You laugh it off, mostly. But your fire has been weak lately. Your dog won't come near. You still perform your duties, but now every execution is a gamble. The crowd murmurs, watches more closely, waits for a mistake. A second swing, a flinch, a drop of blood in the wrong direction. They cheer less. They whisper more. You've stopped showing your face in the market. You leave coins in a pouch by the baker's stoop and hope the bread is fresh. One day, a stone clipped your hood during a hanging. You didn't see who threw it. The guards didn't move. No one claimed it. You picked it up afterward and kept it in your pocket. Not out of sentiment, but as a reminder. You're never more than one bad day away from the block yourself. And the worst part? You understand them. You really do. You are the face of death. You are the final breath. It's easier to hate you than the system that feeds you. Easier to throw blame at a blade than at a law. You once read a marginal note in a crumbling law book. The executioner is the final lie told by justice. You folded that page and read it until the ink faded. Sometimes, you think it's the truest sentence ever written. Even the mayor has grown distant. Used to be he'd consult you personally, over bitter wine and salted pork. Now, it's just messengers. Barely more than boys. They avoid your eyes, speak quickly, and leave faster. You've heard rumors that he's considering a replacement, a younger man, someone with fewer enemies, someone who hasn't botched a public beheading. You wonder what they'll do with you if it happens. A quiet retirement? A sack of coins and a gentle shove toward the woods? Or something more symbolic? Wouldn't that be tidy? The executioner executed full circle. The crowd would love that. You've thought about fleeing, disappearing into the next valley, maybe taking work as a stable hand or a hermit. But even if you left, who would take you in? Who hires the man who's killed half a town? Who shakes the hand that's dragged daughters and fathers and friends to the noose? A fringe tale from the coast tells of an executioner who vanished after 30 years of service. Some say he became a monk. Others say he grew wings and flew into the night, never to be seen again. You suspect he just walked into the sea and didn't stop. You don't want to die, but you're starting to wonder what kind of life this really is. And so you keep sharpening, keep swinging, keep surviving, because that's all that's left now. Not honor, not duty, just momentum. You're the wheel that won't stop turning, the shadow that won't lift, the knife that refuses to rust. But every swing brings the end closer. And next time the crowd turns, you may not walk away. There's a curious paradox to working for royalty. Your hands get cleaner, but your conscience gets filthier. When the summons comes from the castle, instead of the town square, everything changes. The blade is polished, the guards walk straighter, and you're offered food you didn't ask for. But don't mistake it for kindness. No one flatters the hangman without expecting something in return. Your first royal job is burned into your memory like a brand. The messenger arrived in the dead of night, cloaked, nervous, and smelling of sandalwood and sweat. He brought a sealed letter, and a purse heavier than any you'd ever held. You're to report to the eastern gate by dawn. Bring only your best sword, he said, then lower, and forget everything after. You did as told. You always do. The condemned was a man of rank-seer something or other, a knight with too many friends and the wrong kind of opinions. He wasn't to be executed in public, to number. This was a quiet correction. You found him bound, gagged, eyes wide with a look that asked every question your orders told you to ignore. Historians still argue whether royal executioners were assassins in disguise. The line between legal execution and political cleansing was razor thin. You've walked it now. You know, when you kill for a king, it's not about justice. It's about convenience. After that night, the castle called on you more frequently. Nobles who fell from favor, advisors who whispered too freely. One woman who supposedly practiced sorcery, though you never saw any proof. They died in cellars, gardens, and once in a candlelit library filled with books on law. The irony nearly made you laugh. You were told to say nothing, and you didn't. But the coin kept coming, and with it, better clothes, better boots, even meat in your stew. You became the blade behind the throne, the shadow beneath the crown. There's a fringe belief among court servants that those who kill for kings earn a different kind of curse. Not hellfire, but memory. That every royal death carves itself into your dreams, never fading, only whispering louder. You've tested that one. It's true. You still see the night in your sleep. still hear his muffled cry before the blade fell. But the real danger isn't Ghostsit's politics. Because when you work for royalty, you're not just an executioner anymore. You're a secret keeper. And secrets are dangerous currency. You once overheard a countess sobbing behind a curtain, begging the duke not to send her to the hood. She meant you. You were no longer a man. You were a threat. A punishment in flesh. The castle eventually assigned you a title royal enforcer. Sounds cleaner than it is. You got a crest, a sealed ring, and instructions never to use either in public. Your old neighbours would never believe it. The man they refused to share a bench with is now shaking hands with barons. But it doesn't feel like success. It feels like a costume, like a mask that tightens every time you wear it. One mission took you to a distant province, where a young duke had supposedly betrayed the crown. You arrived expecting rebellion. What you found was a man barely older than a boy, terrified, scribbling apologies faster than he could speak. You were told to make it quiet, clean, unquestionable. You obeyed. But afterward, something cracked inside you. You vomited into the snow, not from guilt least not exactly, but from the sheer absurdity of it. A child, dead by royal order, for a letter he probably didn't even write. You reported back with a blank face. They gave you double pay. You keep the gold in a wooden chest under your bed. Never spend it. Sometimes you open it just to remind yourself it's real. Blood money. Literal, clinking, blood-spattered coins. You can't give it away. You can't bury it. So it sits there, like a shrine to the part of you that stopped resisting. One peculiar moment stays with you. A royal feast, where you were made to stand behind a curtain in case one of the guests needed removal. You waited 5 hours, listening to music, laughter, toasts. You saw none of it. When the banquet ended, a servant handed you a single meat pie and said, "Good job. You'd done nothing, but your presence had been enough." That's the power you now carry. Unseen, but felt. It would be a lie to say the pay didn't tempt you. You considered using it to buy a real house. Maybe leave the town. Live somewhere your name wasn't a whisper of death. But you know how this game ends. There is no retiring from royal work. You either die with secrets, or because of them. And the irony? You're more protected than ever and more expendable. Nobles fear you, but they also plot behind your back. If the crown ever shifts, if the wrong heir takes the throne, you'll be next on the list. They won't let you live with what you know. You've become a weapon, sharp and disposable. And deep down, you know you won't die in bed. You'll die in a locked room, with no witnesses, and someone else will take your place before your body cools. But for now, you ride where you're told, swing when commanded, and return to your little shack as if nothing's changed. You eat your soup. You clean your blade. You wonder if the next knock will be your last. Because working for kings doesn't save you. It just delays your sentence. It's easy to forget, in all the blood and ceremony, that you have a family, or at least, you used to. They're still there somewhere beyond the walls, beyond the whispers, beyond the stink of death that clings to your coat. But time and duty have made them strangers. You're not just the town executioner anymore. You're the father no one wants to visit. The husband whose name no one says aloud. Your wife, bless her, stayed as long as she could. Through the first 100 executions, through the mounting silences at supper, through the look in your eyes that darkened every time you came home with blood on your boots. She didn't leave in a storm. No shouting, no slammed doors. Just one morning she was gone. The bread was on the table. A note beside it. "I want to sleep without screaming." You don't blame her. You've got 2 children, both grown now. One tries to pass as the son of a merchant in another town. You haven't heard from him in 3 winters. The other, a daughter, tried to apprentice with a weaver, but the moment they learned her surname, the door closed. You offered to speak on her behalf. She never responded. Historians still argue whether executioners could ever lead normal family lives. Some scrolls suggest they married within their own circles children of guards, gravediggers, other untouchables. Others claim many lived alone, celibate by shame or necessity. Your life, at least, seems to confirm the latter. Solitude isn't a choice. It's inheritance. There was a time you tried to pretend, to play the doting father after hours, to wash your hands extra clean and take your daughter into town for sweets. But the confectioner always scowled. The other children whispered. Eventually, your daughter stopped asking to go, and you stopped offering. Even now, You keep a comb she once used. It's missing 2 teeth. You tell yourself you'll give it back one day, but you won't. One quirky tale you remember from a travelling monk. In the far north, executioners are said to live in houses where the walls breathe, where the ghosts of the condemned whisper bedtime stories to their children. It sounds mad, but you think about it sometimes. About what it would have meant to raise your children in a place where death wasn't a curse, just a craft. You never wanted them to follow in your footsteps. Some executioners tried to pass the trade down. You didn't. You broke that chain the day your son turned 12 and asked how much a head weighed. You looked at him, really looked, and lied. "I don't know," you said. He never asked again. Your wife once said you brought the scaffold home with you, that the way you sat at the table made it feel like someone was always about to die. You tried to laugh. She didn't. Now, the house is quiet. You speak aloud sometimes just to fill the air. The words echo. You've started writing letters you never send. "Dear Elsbeth, I heard you married. I hope he's kind." Or, "Dear Thomas, I saw a boy your age get conscripted today. I thought of you." You fold them neatly and tuck them in the same box where you keep your coin. You pretend that someday, someone might read them and understand. You once visited your old home, just to see it, not to enter, just to look. A new family lives there now, children laughing in the yard, a mother hanging laundry. For a second, you imagined stepping through the gate, saying nothing, just watching. But then a dog barked, and the boy looked over and you saw his face change. Recognition. Not of who you are, but what. You turned around, didn't look back. Your role taints more than your name. It seeps into bloodlines. Your grandchildren, if they exist, will carry your shadow, even if they never meet you. The black mark of the headsman doesn't wash off. You've seen it before. A boy once begged you for work. You asked why. "My father did this," he said. "No one else will take me." You sent him away with coin. Enough to run, not enough to return. Even now, you sometimes dream of another life. You imagine yourself as a carpenter, hands thick with splinters, not blood. You picture a modest workshop, laughter spilling from the windows, the smell of pine instead of iron. Your daughter in the back, learning to shape wood. Your wife humming. A simple life, one with warmth. But dreams are luxury. You wake up cold, as always. Still, you keep their things. A shawl, a child's shoe, that broken comb, relics of the life you almost had. One night, you heard a knock, not the mayor. Not a messenger, but a soft, uncertain tap. You opened the door and found no one, just a sprig of dried lavender tied with twine. Your wife used to wear it in her hair. You stood there for a long time, didn't bring it inside, just closed the door, slowly, like sealing a tomb. You don't know if it was from her, or your daughter, or someone else entirely, but it didn't matter. It reminded you that someone, somewhere, remembered who you were beneath the hood. And sometimes, in your loneliest hours, that's enough to keep the blade from slipping in the wrong direction. For now, you always knew there would be no retirement, no cottage by a stream, no grandchildren on your knee. Your story was written the moment you lifted that first blade, and each name you struck from the town rolls only carved it deeper into the stone. Now, though, the end feels close. You can't say why exactly. Maybe it's the stiffness in your fingers, the tremble that creeps in when you grip the hilt. Maybe it's the way the mayor avoids your eyes, how the guards whisper behind your back, how a younger man has been seen lingering near the scaffold when he thinks you're not watching. They haven't said anything yet. No decree, no final order. But you can feel it coming. The breath before the fall, the pause before the verdict. One last job. That's what they said this morning. Just one more. A high-profile heretic. Big crowd. Important names in attendance. You're to wear the crest. Speak no words. Deliver justice. Then vanish. And you know, in the weight of your bones, that this is your curtain call. Not because they'll kill you afterward, but because there's nothing left in you to give. You sharpen your sword for the last time. You light the lamp with care. You lay out your cloak like a priest setting his vestments. Each motion slow, deliberate, ceremonial. Not for the town. Not for the condemned. For you. Historians still argue whether executioners were ever granted peace in death. Some were buried outside church walls. Some were never buried at all. One was said to have been hanged with his own noose, his body left to rot as a warning to future monsters, but others just a few vanished. No grave, no stone, just silence. You've always hoped to be one of those. You walk through town without your hood, and no one stops you. They glance, quickly, and then look away. Children don't point anymore. They've been taught better. Even fear fades eventually, becomes habit, routine, like everything else. At the scaffold, the air hums with expectation. You climb the steps, not caring if your knees crack or your balance wobbles. You're not here to impress anyone, just to end a life. The heretic meets your eyes. He looks tired, not afraid, just resigned. You recognize that expression. You've worn it for years. He leans forward and whispers, "Do you think it ever mattered?" You don't answer. You raise the blade. And for the first time in years, your hands are steady. The crowd roars, then disperses. As always. But this time, no one comes to collect the body. No guards, no mayor, just you, and a silence thicker than blood. You stand there a long time, sword limp in your hand, until finally you stoop, close the man's eyes, and walk away. Back at your hut, you pour the last of your wine. You burn the ledger. You wrap the tools in cloth and bury them beneath the floorboards. Not because you think someone will use them, but because you want them hidden, quiet, buried like memories. Then, you sit in the doorway, watching the evening bleed into stars. You wonder if they'll send the new man tomorrow, if he'll wear your boots, swing your blade, inherit your silence. You almost pity him. And then, for the first time in years, you do something unexpected. You sleep. So now, as the final chapter closes, you feel the weight begin to lift just a little. The night air is cool, the breeze like a soft breath over your skin. The stars above blink slowly, like eyes growing heavy. The silence that surrounds you isn't empty. It's full of memory, of history, of every quiet moment between the echoes of the scaffold and the shuffle of boots in dust. You made it this far, somehow, through blood and whispers and solitude, through secrets and betrayals, and the 1,000 quiet compromises that turned a person into a tool. But the blade is finally still. The fire has gone out, and your shadow, once so sharp, now softens at the edges. There is no crowd here, no mayor, no priest, no sentence. Just you and the hush of a world that has finally stopped watching. And maybe that's what peace is. Not forgiveness, not forgetting, just the chance to sit a while and not be afraid. The darkness isn't frightening anymore. It's gentle. It wraps around you like a blanket, not a noose. And somewhere, far off, you think you hear a child's laugh, a kettle boil, a song you once knew drifting back on the wind. So rest now. Let your eyes close. Let the quiet take you. Let the stars hold your name. You've done enough. You are enough. You are done. Good night.